haunted by shadow dogs. Because when I was a little girl, I was no older than 4 or 5 years old when this horrible haunting began. I was an only child, and I was the daughter of older parents, and to my knowledge, they were not religious at all. My father was an atheist, and he was teaching me from an early age that there was no such thing as ghosts or angels or even God himself. My mom was right behind my father in his beliefs, but I think she at least believed in God, but never talked about it. But she definitely was not a religious woman by all means. I was a very well cared for child, and my parents were good people, who treated me well. So I was not an emotionally abused child or neglected in any way. I remember having these horrible nightmares every single night, and I call them nightmares because this is what my parents believed they were, but to me, they were real, because they would take place right before I would doze off to sleep. I remember these grayish, black-looking hounds. They were always in a pack, and they had reddish amber eyes that glowed. These shadow dogs would always be growling at me with foam around their mouths. I remember their bodies were transparent-like in form, and you could see through them as if they were ghosts. I remember most of their features were dulled, but some of their features were solid, but they were always baring their teeth and snarling at me. There was at least always 5 or 6 of them in my room at once. When they appeared, I always had this absolutely horrible sense of fear, beyond description. I would be absolutely paralyzed with this horrible fear of impending death. I remember being so frightened that I would hardly breathe because I did not want them to hear me. I also distinctly remember the scent of wet stone, like the scent of an old damp graveyard when they were around me in my room. I remember seeing them at the foot of my bed, pacing menacingly, back and forth, from one side of the room to the next, growling at a low and slow guttural deep unearthly growl. I would try and scream for my mom, but they were somehow able to keep me from screaming, and sometimes I would just lay there paralyzed, as they were snapping at my ankles and trying to bite me. I could hear them under my bed. They would try and communicate with me, not by speaking but in a telepathic type of way. They would show me different ways that I could die. I remember they would try to pull me toward a black mass in the corner of my room. This mass was like a dark tunnel. I would be in a semi-unconscious state when they would try and pull me in. I remember trying to kick my legs, and move my arms to try and fight them off, but I was completely paralyzed. It would seem like time stood still as they threatened me non-stop, until finally somehow I was able to scream out loud and my mom would come running into my room, and turn the light on, and I would be crying frantically and drenched in sweat. I remember finally, my mom began sleeping in my room with me on a regular basis, because these so-called nightmares became worse to the point I would cry hysterically and beg my mom not to leave because the shadow dogs were trying to kill me. I remember feeling tremendous guilt for needing my mom to sleep with me in my bed. This had become the norm, where my mom would have to sleep with me, and when I would finally fall asleep she would sneak back to bed with my father. I remember feeling as though I was a terrible child, because I was causing my parents so much grief, because of my fear of the shadow dogs was frightening the life out of me. This awful haunting went on for about 3 years, and then became less and less as I kept telling myself this isn't real, and I would tell them to go away, to the point it finally stopped. The fear never went away completely, but somehow I figured out a way to dismiss it, as though it doesn't exist. I will never be sure why they were after me, but I can't tell you that what I experienced was real. I can say that it would happen when I was in and out of consciousness, but it's like they would attack me when I was close to going to sleep, maybe because my defenses were down, I don't know, and I may never know. But I pray that I never see them again. If there is anyone else out there that has had similar experiences with shadow dogs or shadow hounds, or whatever you want to call them, I would like to know. If anyone knows what these titles are, I would love to know.